and welcome into Cozy Corner. I hope you're having a wonderfully cozy day. Before we get into today's video, if you're new to the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. I greatly appreciate it. Now, on to today's cozy video. If you've watched my recent birthday mini vlog, you'll have seen that I received quite a few books, and my husband even surprised me with a couple more after I filmed that video. I absolutely love reading, so I thought it'd be interesting to do some bookish content for a change. So I'm going to be doing a sort of then and now video, fantasy edition. I'm going to be showing you 4 books that I read and loved in my childhood versus 4 books I've read and loved as an adult. Now I am recording this live again, so I do apologize for any mistakes I make, especially regarding character names. I have written down some notes to help me remember points from each book, but I can't guarantee I won't mess up. Also, I've tried to make this as spoiler-free as possible for anyone who might like to read these books at some point. So, without further ado, on to the books. I thought I'd start the older books first. So first up, we have the Chronicles of Shannara series by Terry Brooks. Sorry, I just hit my camera stand there. So, I thought I'd start with this one because some of you may be familiar with it, especially if you've watched the TV adaptation. Now, The Sword of Shannara isn't the first book you can read in this series, however, it was the first book I read. Set 2,000 years after a nuclear apocalypse, The Sword of Shannara follows Shay, a half-human, half-elven boy who was placed on the Olmswoods family doorstep in Shady Vale as a baby and taken in. The Olmswoods named him and raised him as their own, alongside their son Flick. Together the pair grow up and become inseparable. So when a tall, dark, mysterious figure arrives in the Vale with a warning for Shay, it's not surprising that Flick is there to support his brother. And when Shay has to leave, Flick accompanies him on his journey. Throughout the story, the pair encounter many more interesting characters who, along with Shay and Flick, go on to shape the other 2 books in the Sword of Shannara trilogy. Following the Sword of Shannara trilogy, we have the Heritage of Shannara, which is comprised of 4 books. These books are set 300 years after the original trilogy. Unfortunately, this is where my knowledge of the Chronicles of Shannara starts to dwindle. I did read the Voyage of the Shannara trilogy, which is set 130 years after the Heritage of Shannara, but I actually haven't read past that. I'm not entirely sure why, but I would like to revisit the series one day and read the books that I've missed. Next, we have the Bulgarian series by David Eddings. If the Chronicles of Shannara series was a tad daunting, the Bulgarian isn't quite as long and is, in my opinion, still very good. I'm currently rereading the series, and I'm currently on the 4th book. We start our epic adventure with this book here, Pawn of Prophecy. Interestingly, all the books in the Bulgaria series have a theme. The titles of each of the 5 books in the series combines a chess term with a fantasy term. Set in a sprawling fantasy land, the Bulgarian follows Garion, a simple farm boy from Sandaria. He is tragically orphaned at a very young age and ends up living with his Aunt Pole on Falda's farm. Much of his young life is spent in the kitchen under his aunt's watchful gaze. It isn't until he is older that he starts to explore. He is invariably drawn to the smithy where he meets Dernick, one of his closest friends, and another important character in the story. He seemingly has an idyllic life until something important is stolen, and Garion is thrown onto a path that has been destined long before he was even born. And everything Garion thought he knew is tried and tested, as he's dragged away from the safety of Fowler's farm and is forced into a wide world he has no idea about. Accompanied by some rather lovable and interesting characters, we're taken on an epic journey that really highlights the struggles between good and evil, the nature of destiny, and the power of friendship and loyalty. And while you don't necessarily need to read the sequel, as the events of the Bulgariad are concluded in the 5th book, I would highly recommend doing so. The Malloreon is also 5 books long, and again follows Garion and his companions as they embark on another journey. However, this time, the stakes have changed, and the struggle between light and dark continues. There are 2 more books you can read after the Malloreon, which serve as both sequel and prequel to the series. However, due to the titles of these books, I unfortunately can't name them, as it would unfortunately spoil the series. However, interestingly, they were both co-authored with David Eddings' wife, Lee. Next is probably one of my favourite books, and it is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. As you can see, it's been very well loved. This is actually my original childhood copy of The Hobbit, and while I do have a beautifully illustrated updated version, I thought I'd show you this copy so you can see just how much I read it. With its ripped front cover that once had sellotape holding it down to its what looks like nibble pages, I think one of my hamsters might have tried to eat it. It's still very much in good reading condition. Although I don't intend to read this version anymore due to its age, it's quite special and has become almost like an heirloom. Probably the most recognizable book in this list so far, The Hobbit is set in the vast world of Middle-earth. The story follows a rather sheltered and particularly pampered hobbit called Bilbo Baggins. While his mother came from a rather adventurous family, his father did not. The Bagginses were a respectable bunch, not just because most of them were rich, but also because they are quoted as never going on any adventures and never doing anything unexpected. So it is of course most unexpected when a total of 13 dwarves arrives on Bilbo's doorstep. Plunged into an adventure he never asked for, Bilbo becomes the 14th member of their party and ventures from the Shire on a journey that will ultimately test his courage and loyalty. With strong themes of home and birthright, as the dwarves strive to reclaim what once was theirs, and Bilbo desires to return to the Shire, as well as exploring the corruption of greed, The Hobbit is an epic coming-of-age tale with the most unlikely of protagonists. So, it's probably no surprise that the last book from my childhood, and definitely another favourite, is of course The Lord of the Rings, also by J.R.R. Tolkien. Let me just, there we go, that's a better view of them. Now, not as old as my copy of The Hobbit, this book is still quite old. It was one of the first books I purchased from Waterstones by myself, and as you can see, it is also well loved. And also like The Hobbit, I've read it many times. It is also quite special, as is it tongue-tied, as it is the 50th anniversary edition. I don't know if you can see that on the spine there. The Lord of the Rings is a massive tale, as you can see, and it is probably the longest book I've ever read. To have read it multiple times, I think, is quite the achievement. Probably just as recognizable as The Hobbit, if not more so, The Lord of the Rings follows yet another unlikely protagonist, Frodo Baggins. Having lost both his parents in a tragic boating accident, the orphan Frodo is taken in and raised by his uncle Bilbo. However, it is this act that ultimately leads Frodo on an epic quest that sees him leaving the comfort of the Shire, carrying an object his uncle had found over 60 years before. Although he does not travel alone. His closest friend Sam, along with two of his kin, Merry and Pippin, join him, and he is later joined by 5 others: Gandalf, Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli, who all together end up making the Fellowship. And it is this unlikely band of companions who must continue on the quest Frodo started to finally destroy the object he carries. Lord of the Rings highlights the classic struggle between good versus evil, whilst also exploring the reality of death and the draw of immortality, the importance of fellowship and friendship, and the corrupting influence of power. Wow, so this ended up being a lot longer than I had anticipated. I'm sorry for my stumbling and mistakes and everything like that. I get really nervous making live videos. However, I think I might end this here. While the majority of my videos are longer, I think I'd like to keep this as short as possible. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop here and do a part 2. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video so far though, and what was your favourite fantasy book growing up? Please let me know in the comment section below, and as always, thanks for watching. Till next time, stay cozy.